All right. Hey everyone. Let's get started right away. So let's see, where did we leave off? We have our meteor gauge, which so far we have never actually seen. We've never actually seen the meteor gauge fill up. I've had it paused at like completely filled just because if it empties, the game is over. And when I'm testing it, I don't want to continually keep trying to make shots. But how I envision it working is we have 0 balls. And when it fills up to the top, we get a ball. And up to max 3 balls. Or up to max some arbitrary number. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. We're gonna have to like balance it and see how it feels. Remember, we didn't even add any special, like, why would I want a meteor ball? Other than it looks cool, it doesn't do anything special yet. Um, so the first thing I'm gonna do is disable this. Right now it's like paused. I want to turn it back on. So let me see how I did that. Right now it is its own widget called fire gauge. Let's see how that was implemented. So I have a bunch of animations and a fill percent. Usually, I mean, this was a while ago, but usually I put a little box around wherever I temporarily disable something so I can see, hey, this is not the normal state of this thing. But it looks like I'm not doing it here. I think I might have done it in the game state. Let's look in the arcade game state. Main game state? Probably not. It's going to be in specifically the arcade mode because that bar doesn't exist in any of the other modes. Let's. The fuzzy searching in Unreal is so bad, like maybe non-existent. But I feel like I could start from the middle of the word. But I want to just find. It's Unreal should fix that because it would make it a lot easier. And pretty much every other IDE ever has a fuzzy search. Let's see, in the core, arcade mode, hoops mode, arcade hoops game mode. Maybe it's in here. Yep, see? No, 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 no. I mean, it's really obvious that this has something to do with it. That's why I leave these little blocks around here. Most of my IDEs, when I code, I can just like do a search through all of my blueprints for no, 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 and I know that that's where I find something that shouldn't be in the production code. Let's see. I don't even know if that works. Like if I can search for comment, no, 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 no. Yeah. So these are all my no, no, nos. That's how I know that how I find all my like UI print strings and um, kind of like this little method I've been doing for years now. So let's see. I'm going to enable this again. How did this work? um, let's see. Fire total drop time. Right now it says 150. What if I put that in? All right, so now it's dropping. It's dropping. Let's see. Let's just let it go and see what happens. So this is going to be something I'm going to tweak to make it go faster, slower, make the game harder. Um, when it gets down, oh, it's blinking, it's pulsating red, and then it's game over. Cool. So, just to make sure that it's still doing what it should be doing, I have to actually get a shot. This is why I paused it. All right, so it fills up. I get a ticket. Now, when I get it all the way filled, I want to get a meteor gauge to fill up. Let me put the cans on in case we start getting like echo. It's hard, but it's easier with my finger. That was incorrect. Um, all right, so I immediately can tell this is going to be hard to test because um, I only. How am I going to test this? All right, first of all, we need to make this so there are no balls. Oh my god, yeah, it's going to be it's going to be hard to test this. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Just to make it easier to test, I'm going to make the condition like programmable. So instead of when it hits the top of the gauge, I'm just going to make it so if I could make it if I just make any shot, but still that's a little harder than I'd like. Maybe I want to make it so every ball I toss, regardless, like I toss a ball, I get that would actually work. That would be let us be able to test that it maxes out at 3, that it disappears. Yeah, that should be good. All right, so I'm gonna leave this. Um, Let me just make a note because you never know how long it's gonna be until I redo this. Um, Disconnect, connect, and set to 150 to pause gauge. Okay, good enough. Um, might want to pause it. It's fine. I'm gonna leave it. Now let's see. Let's go back to our gameplay UI, and now we have to make a decision. Are we going to have all the balls in here just waiting and hide them, or are we going to dynamically insert them into the meteor gauge? Um, well, since we encapsulated it in its own widget, it doesn't matter. We can do all that work here. All right, so what we have going on here is 3 statically defined in this box. Um, and what we could do is add a function called, like add to gauge. And it will go and put in a meteor icon and a spacer. Actually, these meteor icons are blueprints as well. Now, if we make it so we hide them, it might be harder to manipulate them. And I'm thinking these spacers are no good. It might be better. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of these spacers because it's going to be harder to manipulate this. If we want space, we can always add it to the icon itself. Um, all right, so let's get rid of these. And we want to make this vertical box a variable. So we'll click on that. And now let's go to the graph mode. And what we want to do is, I don't like how it's named that. I mean, I guess it really doesn't matter. Oh, I can't rename it. Okay, totally doesn't matter. Um, all right, so let's add a function. We'll call it add meteor icon. And what we want it to do is just take this vertical box and we want to append to it a new meteor icon. So we want, okay, we're going to append to it something. So let's see. Um, add child. So what are we going to add to this box? We need to add a meteor icon. All right, so it is what I thought. All right, we got to create it. We got to spawn this new box. Um, so let's create a sequence. Hold down S and click. And the first thing we're going to do is create a widget. So we're going to create a new widget. And the class is going to be meteor icon. And the owning player, get player pawn. Yeah, get player. Can I just get the pawn? Get player controller. Oh, yeah, that works. I never, sometimes I think it's the pawn, sometimes I don't know, but that works. We only have one player in our game, so we can just assume that the index is 0. Um, I haven't dealt with two-player games yet, so I never had to deal with other than, the case of just saying get player controller and just setting it to be 0. But this will be fine. So first we create a meteor icon widget. I don't think we need to save it because we can always just get it from our vertical box. So we're going to, let's promote to a local variable, and we'll call it meteor icon. Cool. And let's just create meteor icon widget. Make this nice and organized from the beginning. And then we're going to add to the vertical box this meteor icon. So let's put it in here. Add meteor icon to gauge. Cool. I don't like how, man, I'm just going to try to make it nice. It only takes an extra, like, couple seconds. All right, so we have this. So right now, it'll just continuously add um, balls to this meteor gauge, like forever. So we need to somehow fit in the max. Mm, mm, mm. Sorry, give me a second here. Mm, mm.
And he doesn't. Look up over the edge
Hey.
because you were on the edge.
Um, mm. So sorry about that. Now, what we need to do is add in the idea that there's going to be a maximum amount. And we also need to add a function in there that uses one up whenever we drag one out. But that's going to be in a minute. So I guess as a sanity check, let's just make sure that this does what we expect it to do. That's always fun. I like to see progress. That always makes it more, it always makes it easier to keep moving forward when we see something good happen. So let's wire this up to our condition, which now what I'm thinking is we could use an event-based method where the gauge itself will subscribe to what we want to trigger adding a new ball. Um, so I think that might be the best way to do it. Now, that means we need to create either the dispatch event or we could just find an event that already happens. All right, which I already added like a test event, which is, or maybe it's not even a test event. Maybe we actually use it all the time. Um, but what that event is throw ball. So let's look for it. Let's find in blueprints um, thrown ball thrown event, and that bind event to ball thrown dispatcher. Now that is what we want to do here. How did I do it in? All right, so in the main player state, we're doing that. Actually, I'm gonna bind this find window up here so we can just easily find stuff. Um, so let's see, bind event thrown dispatcher. So it comes right from the player controller. Cool. And we have that. So let's wire it up. Let's just do it. Let's do it. It's fast. Let's do it. All right. So let's go to our event graph. And whenever we construct, we're going to do that. So on construct, let's get the player controller. Actually, since we're using the player controller, it might be worth it just to save it. So let's get player controller, and we will promote to variable player controller. Now we can assume that this is going to be a hoops player controller because we would never have a meteor gauge in any other scene. So I'm going to take this and cast it. Nope, this is all incorrect. I'm going to cast it here to hoops player controller. I'm going to make a sequence here. I'm going to do a couple things. Let's get the player controller and let's promote to variable. Let's just change this to a hoops. Hey, hoops. Hoops player controller. And we're going to set it. We don't need this pre-construct. I don't like them in there if I don't need them yet. I'll add them later if I need those. So here, set vars. I could make this a macro, but let's just leave it like this for now. And now we're gonna take the player controller and we're gonna bind to ball thrown. Now, whenever the ball's thrown, it'll fire this event. But we don't have an event yet, so we're gonna add it and we're gonna call it ball thrown the thropon event. And what do we want to happen? Notice there's no parameters. It's real simple. It's not like, I mean, maybe what could be useful is if we actually threw in there which ball was thrown. But we don't have that. We just have a ball was thrown. And remember, we're going to eventually change this. This is just for testing. Um, so whenever a ball is thrown, we want to call add meteor icon. And that's it. It should work. Let's try it. And they should work too. Oh, okay. So already we know we don't want any ball thrown. Yeah. So it's doing what we wanted it to do. All right. Next on my list, we're gonna have it max out at 3 because that's just too many balls. But that's good. That's good. All right. So we will add that limit. Let's make it we could make it configurable because we might want to level up and have it so you can add more to your gauge. I don't know. So I think it should be part of maybe the game state. Hoops mode. No, hoops. Hoops mode. Game mode player state. So yeah, tick rate. Well, maybe we should add in. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking if this is the right place to add it. But I think it is, because we're not going to have that meteor gauge without the fire gauge. And the fire gauge belongs in here. So we can always refactor it later, but I am going to add a variable in here. And we're going to call it max meteor gauge. And we'll set a default integer. Got to compile it first. And we'll set this to 3. And we didn't really deal with persistent stat, like persistent customizable stats yet. But we'll get into that when we start wiring it up to the server, which should be I'm like super excited and looking forward to wiring up all the backend stuff. But that's where we'll deal with this and leveling it up. But for now, let's set it to 3. And also, the meteor gauge now will need to know about this. So up here in the vars, we're also going to get the state. Does this come off of the player controller? Get player state. Hmm. maybe it's in here. Get what did we call it? Max. Well, we can probably cast to Arcade Hoops game mode player state because we know that we're in hoops mode if we have this gauge. And that means now we have the max fire gauge value, max meteor gauge. Oh, look, I have a max fire gauge max value. So I want to, first of all, I want to keep this consistent. So we'll call this meteor gauge max value. That's better. That's better. Come here and we'll say get meteor gauge max value. And instead of needing to get that all the time, nope, I'm going to just set this player state. So now we have the player controller and the player state. Perfect. Now, when we add our meteor icon, what we can do is just do a little check first, which is what we're going to do. Let's make this a little bit bigger. We'll have a branch. And we want this vertical box. And we want the count. And we want to make sure that it's less than 3. Get the state, meteor gauge max value. And if it is true, and that should do it. Let's just condense these a little better. Let's pull this up here. Looking good-ish. Add icon to meteor gauge. If and only if um, gauge not maxed. Maxed? Maxed. Maxed. Out. Now, let's just see if it works. 1, 2, 3. Woo-hoo-hoo! Awesome. All right. Note that this gauge needs to disappear along with everything else. I don't know why it's not. Um, but that's good. That's good. That's good so far. Next, what would be cool is if we can make them disappear when we use them. Mm-hmm. Also, we should you know, another thing is I don't like the how. Okay, so what I think is right now the player state is not the source of truth here. The player state is being updated from this. This thing is going to detect, oh, we're going to add, we're going to add a meteor ball, and it does it. But if we ask the player state, it won't know. The player state would have to query the UI, which I don't like. I want the UI to reflect the player state. So what I might want to do is invert how this is working. But now that it already works, it's just a matter of refactoring, which is pretty easy. But this is what I'm thinking. I want to take the ball thrown and bind that in the player state. So the player state says, oh, a ball was thrown. Let me add to the current number of balls. And then that'll fire off another event, which is ball meteor gauge updated. At which point the UI here doesn't know like the condition, like, oh, a ball was thrown. It just knows, hey, the meteor gauge has been updated. Let's adjust. That's what I'm going to do. Do I have enough time? Maybe. Maybe I have enough time. Let's see. All right, let's just do it. Like what? Okay, let's just do it. So let's go into our hoops player state, and this, where are we binding? Here. Now remember, we're not even going to bind to ball throw event. This is just all proof of concept. But what we're going to do is not do this at all. We're going to do something else. So let's go to our main game. Nope. Our game mode player state. Let's go to our event graph. So here we say when scored, add to fire gauge. You know what? I'm just going to piggyback off this. And I'm going to say when scored, add to fire gauge. And also, just for fun, I'm going to update the fire gauge update. What do we got here? Add to fire gauge. We're going to, I guess, see, we have add to fire gauge. I guess we'll have an add to meteor gauge. And let's just wire that up before we even start. So we're going to go add to meteor gauge. And it'll only ever be one. We don't need to pass in anything. Just going to add one. And there we go. And what's add to meteor gauge going to do? It is going to take our meteor gauge value and maybe we can have this thing clamp the value, because like the UI itself shouldn't like have the business logic in there of like, oh, there's three or whatever. So a meteor gauge value is going to have a range. Can I give it a variable? No, that's stupid. I'm just going to do it like this. Meteor gauge, add 1. And I want to clamp this and the max is going to be get meteor gauge max value. So this should do the same thing. It should add 1 and then take whatever is incorrect. Min. I want to take whatever is the min. The Max value. What am I doing? Ah! I want to take the minimum of that and our max value. And set that to the new meteor gauge value. Stop. How annoying. Okay. So now we have a way to add a meter gauge. So this is increase the value. We want to do this. Hold down S. We're going to do this first. And then when it's done, so what we want to do here, nope. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. We only want to fire off an event only if it actually added. So it might be easier to just um, make a branch in here. And we'll say if the meter gauge value is less than the max value, then we want to add 1. So if it's less, we increase the meter gauge value. Oh, come on. I just want it to look nice-ish. Now we want to fire off a meteor gauge has been updated. So let's add a new event dispatcher. Meteor gauge updated dispatcher. All right. And it is going to have a, was it added or subtracted? Um, they might be, there are going to be different actions. So I don't want updated. I want meteor gauge incremented. Incremented dispatcher. That's what I want. Um, Now, I don't even think I need to know how many there are. I'm just going to do whatever it says. So I don't even need a parameter yet. I mean, I can come back and change it. But I think this should be good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it. And that should be it. Now, what we're getting out of this is we'll always be able to ask the player state how many are in there. And we don't care about the UI. The UI is just there as visual help, which is all we want. We want, we don't want the source of truth to be the UI because that's some bad coupling. So let's go back to our meteor gauge. And now what we want to do is we want to get the player state. Nope. No, we don't. Yep, we do. This is the event. We want to bind to increment. See, fuzzy search worked here. So bind the meter gauge incremented. So whenever this widget's created, we're going to wire it up to say whenever it's incremented. Now, we don't even care how it's incremented. We're going to add an event. Meteor gauge incremented. So we're going to add an icon. Now, I feel like I'm missing something. Did we ever tell it? Did we ever bind it to an on throw? I don't remember. Let's go to our player state. So here. So, okay, so we added this function add to meteor gauge. But I don't think we called it anywhere. Oh, we did. Whenever we score. So that should be working. Let's try it out. We just have to score. Yeah. So this is good progress before I start work. Before my workday begins, I did what I wanted to do. Woo! Yeah. All right.